With Dragon Age, I think you have a much better combat system in Dragon Age. The difficulty, I think, is better. You have a lot more diversity in the types of mobs that you're going to fight. There's also more of a variety in how you can create, I guess, all of your characters. You actually have control of all of your characters. How you can build all of the characters. You can build them for a variety of different ways. And the combat, of course, is much better. You actually have more of a challenge because in Greedfall, the major problem with the Greedfall combat system is that it revolves a lot around stutters and knockdowns. And either you're fighting humans who are easily knocked down and stuttered all the time, and then you just basically crowd control them and the fights become boring, or you're fighting like most of the monsters that exist in the world, and every single attack that a monster does is a stutter knockdown. So the fights become very repetitious and one-sided. The other thing is that for some reason, just like in Dragon Age, you have the pause mechanic in between fights, and typically you'd see a pause mechanic like that in a top-down game, kind of like Dragon Age, or like in other Dungeon and Dragon type games. You'd see that pause mechanic in a game, and that was primarily because you'd have multiple characters and you could direct multiple characters to do different things. So I could have a tank and I could, instruct my tank to AoE threat or taunt or single taunt or utilize a stun ability. I could direct my healer to heal or to buff, etc. Right? In Greedfall, you only have control of one character, which is your main character in terms of development, as well as in terms of control during the flow of combat. So it's kind of weird having that sort of a pause mechanic in the game, because you're really only controlling your own character, and you can literally just put all of the abilities or skills or items that you want to use, and you can just bind them to a hotkey. So that's kind of why I didn't understand why they added that. I mean, I guess if they wanted to add it for the purpose of having it in as an RPG game, but typically you'd see that in areas where you controlled, your entire team. The other thing that I wish that they added, where you can actually build, like each character is kind of designed towards a certain route, and it just continues to flow in that way, with you having absolutely no input into how that character works, except for minor tweaks to the armor and weapons that they can utilize, and that's primarily just in how good the specific items that they can use are. So I would say, like, overall, the combat system, the overall game of Dragon Age is just far better. I think what the Greedfall developers should have done, which was just focus on one aspect of the game and really hone that aspect of the game and really get it solid. Unfortunately, Greedfall does everything kind of mediocre.
I'm sorry, Chief, but I cannot let you do that.
So you finished talking and you want to fight now?
You leave me no choice.
Bit of poison on my blade. And let's go!
So you see, like, I can pause the game and I can basically utilize these actions, but my characters are basically going to do whatever they want to do. And so, like I said before, when you're fighting humans can be easily crowd controlled via knockdowns and stutters. Whoa! That's a lot of damage. And one shot. Actually, no, that was probably two shots. Probably took out all of my armor. The other weird thing is that you kind of have certain characters that are designed towards, like, for example, like the characters that I have with me right now. So my character I designed more of like a brawler support. Kurt is the equivalent of like your brawler tank, and then Vasco would be like more in line with like a thief. But the weird thing is that they have kind of like part of the whole of a Trinity style gameplay, which is you have like You can create characters, for example, who are like magic casters and that are designed more around like magic damage. You can be like more of a support character. You can go like in the mixture, so you can kind of be dedicated to like just the thief kind of play, more like a melee brawler magic user, and then you can build your characters in between. The weird thing is that there's no threat generation system in the game. So you have like your spellcaster damage dealer, and then you have like your spellcaster support, and then you have like your lockpick, kind of like what you would think, you know, what you would classify as like your thief class, and then you have like the brawler class, but then you don't have anybody that revolves like around tanking or generating threat, which would also help the game, especially on harder difficulties, like where you can get two shot, like in that example. I should have just blocked and dodged.
Bit of poison on my blade.
But that's the primary problem with GreedFall, I think, is their combat system, where you can knock down somebody and just basically chain stutter him, as you can see right there. Right? Perfect example. Where you see they kind of just perpetually get stuttered over and over and over again. Stone Mason skirt.